They laughed while I poured coffee with a shaking hand, as if the sound of their spoons against porcelain could drown the quiet thing I was building. My name is Ivy Calder. I come from a mill town where the river runs brown in winter and the streetlights stay on all day because the censors gave up. I was 19 when my mother died, 20 when the landlord changed the locks, and 21 when I started sleeping in my hatchback behind the old railway museum. Nobody knew, or if they did, they politely let the knowledge pass them by. My aunt hosted those Sunday breakfasts the year I decided to climb out. The table was heavy with food we pretended we could afford. My cousins traded stories about internships and weekend trips. I wore a thrift store blazer with a button that kept falling off. When I said I had registered a business, their laughter rose like steam over the pancakes. "What kind of business?" my cousin Garrett smirked. "Cleaning," I said. "Turnovers, offices, post-construction, whatever pays on time." He grinned at the others. "So, a mop." Our Ivy's got a mop and a dream. My uncle Alistair topped off his coffee and said, "It's good to have goals, kiddo. Something modest." He meant safe. He meant small. He meant I should know my place, which was near the sink. They knew me as the girl who once asked to borrow money for textbooks and never got it. The girl who hummed while she scrubbed dishes because music fills the spaces where hope is thin. The girl who had nothing and therefore, in their eyes, would stay that way. What they didn't know was the map taped under the hatchback mattress, marked with every office park, every property manager, every email sent and unanswered. They didn't know about the night shifts in supermarkets and the morning shifts at the bakery, how I kept a toothbrush in my glove compartment and a hard hat in the trunk. They didn't know I was learning, line by line, how invoices breathe. After breakfast, my aunt pulled me aside to offer a ladylike suggestion. "If you want something steady, Ivy, the banquet hall needs weekend staff. We could use your energy." The banquet hall was the family jewel, a pretty box with a leaking roof. Weddings, anniversaries, fundraisers, all of it run by people who loved photographs more than balance sheets. I'd scrubbed floors there as a teenager for tips in an envelope and stale sliders at midnight. I smiled now and said I'd think about it. She patted my hand as if she had gifted me a future in a bow. On my way out, I passed Uncle Alistair on the phone near the garage, voice low. "No, we're fine for now. The bank understands. The slow season is temporary." He noticed me and straightened, his face smoothing into the kind mask he wore for family. I kept walking, hands in my pockets, eyes on the new winter sky. The laughter still warmed the kitchen behind me. My car waited like a promise in the street, a little engine that always turned over, a back seat that smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and dry coffee grounds. At the library that afternoon, I printed 20 flyers and a stack of business cards I designed for free online. Calder clean. Reliable. Insured. I stood under the bulletin board, thumbtacks in my palm, and saw my reflection in the plexiglass. Tired. Focused. Unapologetic. That night, I folded the thrift blazer on the passenger seat and wrote out a list on a pizza box lid. People. Buildings. Numbers. I circled the word numbers. Not because I liked them, but because they never laugh. The first spark didn't feel like lightning, it felt like exhale. Somewhere behind me, porcelain chimed, and someone told a joke at my expense. Somewhere ahead, a door I hadn't found yet waited to be opened, quietly, with clean hands. Work arrived slowly, then all at once. I got my first contract from a property manager who needed 3 vacant apartments turned around by Monday. I said yes, borrowed 2 shop vacs, and cleaned until dawn. On Tuesday, my hands shook when I deposited the check. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and it didn't bounce. The social cost made its own ledger. My cousins posted photos from the hall, all crystal stemware and chiffon, and tagged each other, never me. I saw myself in the background of one photo, kneeling on a step stool, replacing a bulb before guests arrived. A comment below it said, "There's Ivy. Always hustling." A string of laughing emojis followed. I closed the app and wiped fingerprints off a mirror until the glass held only light. I learned in public. I misquoted a job and lost money. I bought cheaper gloves and tore them in an hour. I forgot to include disposal fees and nearly cried in my car when the landfill attendant lifted his hand for cash I didn't have. At night, I kept a notebook open on the dashboard and wrote the mistakes like commandments. Bring extra bags. Photograph before and after. Get signatures. Charge for keys. I refused tips when I could because I wanted respect, not pity. When clients tried to talk down the rate, I kept my voice even. The rate covers insurance, supplies, and skilled labor. I can recommend a student if you prefer. Most stayed. Some didn't. The ones who stayed called again. The banquet hall called, too. At first, it was just weekend cleanup. Then it was weekday emergencies. The dishwasher broke during a fundraiser. The women's room backed up during a gala. The roof leaked during a storm and stained a ceiling tile above the dance floor like a bruise in a white dress. We'll fix it as soon as cash flow improves, my uncle told me, eyes sliding away. My aunt still offered compliments that felt like receipts. You're so good with your hands. So reliable. She meant I was convenient. She meant I belonged behind the scenes. When the family gathered, I wiped down the bar after they left. Sometimes, I found forgotten place cards with names written in gold ink. I kept one and taped it to my dashboard, Ivy Calder, reserved. The slow season at the hall stretched long. I overheard a vendor ask for payment on linens. Next week, my aunt promised. You know us. He looked tired. I looked at the ceiling again. Numbers don't laugh, they also don't lie. Something was coming due. I enrolled in a community workshop called Small Business Finance, the part nobody warns you about. We met in a room with buzzing lights and stale coffee. The instructor, a woman with a calm voice and a sharp pencil, drew a triangle on the board. Profit, cash flow, debt service. You can be profitable on paper while your cash dies, she said. You can be busy and still broke. After class, I walked past the hall and saw my uncle smoking under the awning, cheeks hollow, suit shiny from wear. He nodded at me like we were colleagues. In a way, we were. We both sold belief disguised as service, and we both prayed the calendar would stay full. Need help this weekend? I asked. We always need help, he said, and his voice snagged on the word always. He flicked ash into a puddle that reflected the crooked sign. The sea in Calder's banquet hall had lost its bulb and hung in the dark like a missing tooth. I went home to the hatchback and wrote my own vow on a receipt. It was short, plain, and absolute. Build something that can stand in daylight. Build it so quietly that laughter dies on its way to your door. The discovery began with a stack of free newspapers outside the library. I took one to cover a paint bucket in my trunk and a notice on the second page stopped me cold. Delinquent tax list, the header read, in a font that didn't care who saw it. I ran my finger down columns of parcel numbers until a familiar address rose up like a bruise under skin. 18 Riverstone Lane. Calder's banquet hall. I sat in my car, mouth dry, while the pages whispered. The county had published properties with unpaid taxes, a formality before auction. It didn't mean certain loss. It meant time ticking in a room without windows. I folded the paper once, then twice. I walked back inside and to the reference desk. How do tax liens work? I asked. The librarian handed me a pamphlet and a look that said many people ask too late. I took notes in the margins. Redemption period. Interest rate. Notice requirements. All those structured words soften nothing. Debt is not dramatic, it is gravity. At the legal clinic the next week, I met Teresa Ng, a small business attorney who volunteered on Thursdays. She had quiet shoes and a quick memory. I brought my questions and my cleanest notebook. I am not here to hurt anyone, I said, but I need to understand the landscape. Landscape is a good word, she said. People think law is a hammer. Often, it's topography. I learned about tax lien certificates and about a different path, less public and more surgical. The banquet hall carried a mortgage through a regional bank that had changed names twice after mergers. If the loan was distressed, a debt purchaser could acquire it and step into the bank's shoes. They'd assign you the note and collateral rights, Teresa said. Then it's math and notice. I don't have that kind of money, I said. You might not need as much as you think, she said. Banks discount non-performing loans. The question is whether you want to be in that business. It is not personal. It only feels that way. I started saving for a different reason. I scaled the cleaning crew to 4 part-timers and worked alongside them to keep payroll low. I replaced the hatchback with a used van and put my name on the doors, white letters like a promise. I slept 6 hours a night and learned to love black coffee that tasted like decisions. Teresa introduced me to a broker who specialized in distress notes, a man who spoke in numbers like a second language. He confirmed the hall's loan was behind. There's been forbearance, he said, but covenants are breached. They're months from a real conversation. We had a real conversation. I wired an earnest deposit that felt like handing over a rib. I produced financials and references and a letter from a client who described my work in crisp, factual sentences. The bank, tired of chasing payments and patient enough to count only, accepted. The day the assignment of loan and collateral rights arrived by courier, I sat on my apartment floor, knees against the coffee table I'd refinished from junk. My name was on the assignment, and so were theirs. I read the rider twice, then 3 times. The proof object was brown-tinted and warm from the delivery truck. It smelled of ink and delivery tape. It did not smell like victory. It smelled like responsibility for an old roof and a debt that was now mine to steward. I called Teresa. So I own the storm, I said. You own the umbrella, she replied. Decide how to use it. We drafted a notice of assignment and demand to cure, measured, professional, correct down to the zip code +4. I asked for nothing more than the loan required and offered nothing less than the law permitted. The papers did not gloat. They did not shout. They did what truth does when given a signature. They stood up. They booked the spring engagement party for Garrett and his fiancée on a Saturday that smelled like rain. The hall shone in photographs, if you cropped the corners. I arrived at noon with my crew to do the pre-event clean. My aunt smiled as if the last 10 years had been a minor misunderstanding. You always come through, she said. Contract says we do, I answered. It sounded colder than I meant, but it was accurate. At 2, Teresa arrived in a navy dress and a raincoat, a folder tucked under her arm. We took seats in the office where the walls wore wedding photos like armor. It was time to speak, not argue. The process server would meet us at 3. My uncle entered a few minutes later, tie askew, pen behind his ear. Ivy, we'll need extra help tonight, he said, breathless with lists. He noticed Teresa and paused. And you are? My attorney, I said. His eyes did something careful. Attorney. Teresa set the folder on the desk and opened it to the first page, the one with the assignment and the bank seal. She placed a letter on top, the notice of assignment and demand to cure, then another with a proposed forbearance plan attached, neat and lawful. "Mr. Calder," she said, "as of last week, the undersigned holds your note and deed of trust. Please review the notice. We're here in person as a courtesy." He took the papers with hands that had cut cake and poured champagne and learned the weight of ledger books. He read silently, mouth tightening at the edges. He turned a page. Teresa waited, still as a compass. I stood with my fingers stilled against my palm. My aunt came in with a tray of glassware and saw the papers. "What is this?" she asked, voice small. "A change in lenders," Teresa said. "Standard. The terms remain the same, plus accrued interest and late fees as provided. There is also a proposed path to cure, if performance resumes immediately." My cousin Garrett arrived like weather, cheeks bright, jacket too tight, laughter ready. "We're doing a family summit," he said, looking from face to face, then down at the letterhead. His smile emptied. "You've got to be kidding." "I'm not," I said. My voice was steady and low. "This is business." He snorted. "You couldn't get into college, Ivy." "I got into Tuesday mornings," I said. "They pay on time." The process server knocked twice and entered, polite and efficient. He confirmed names and handed duplicates to each required party. He left as quietly as he came. Papers do not need applause. "This is a family place," my aunt said, palms up, pleading with the air. "You don't understand what you're doing." "I understand exactly what I'm doing," I said. "I am offering terms your previous lender stopped offering. I'm asking you to honor your promises or surrender the collateral. We can sign a forbearance that keeps your doors open if you begin paying, now." My uncle set the papers down. "We're hosting an event tonight." "And tonight can proceed," Teresa said. "Our notice is effective, but we're not here to ruin anyone's celebration. We are here to set the path forward." Garrett's jaw worked. "This is revenge." I shook my head. "This is structure." No one spoke for a moment. Out in the hall, a string quartet rehearsed, brittle notes finding their lines. Rain began, soft on the roof. The ceiling stain waited for someone to notice it with the right budget. My aunt reached for the pen. "What does the forbearance require?" she asked. 6 months of on-time payments, proof of bookings, escrow for repairs, monthly reports, Teresa said. "If you comply, we will capitalize arrears and extend the term. If you do not, you will sign a deed in lieu on day one so there's no doubt about the end." My uncle glanced at me. "You can live with this." "I can live with fairness," I said. "And with silence." He signed. My aunt signed. Garrett watched the ink darken where promises had lived too long in talk. The rain steadied. The quartet found the melody. Teresa gathered the papers and slid them into the folder. Justice didn't raise its voice. It simply sat between us like an honest guest, not asking for cake. They made 3 payments, then missed 2. The booking slowed. The roof demanded more than hope could buy. On the first day of the 6th month, Teresa and I walked back into the office at 18 Riverstone Lane with the deed in lieu already drafted. No one cried. My aunt's lipstick was careful. My uncle's hands were clean. I signed where the law asked me to, and they signed where the law asked them to. It rained again, as if the sky remembered. I did not evict the bookings on the calendar. We honored every contract. We fixed the roof and painted the ceiling and replaced the flickering bulbs one by one. After the last scheduled event, I closed the hall for 8 weeks and let it exhale. The carpet stopped smelling like spilled champagne. The walls stopped listening for applause. When we reopened, the sign read Riverstone House. No possessive, no past. We still hosted weddings, but we also ran weekday programs the town never had, job skills classes, small business clinics, free legal nights with Teresa and her colleagues, a weekly breakfast for vendors who always got paid last. We kept invoices short and clear. We paid on time. The bank accounts became steady instead of thrilling. Garrett came by once, hands in his pockets, a man standing where his reflection used to be. "You win," he said, not unkindly. "There wasn't a contest," I answered. "There was a building." He looked up at the repaired ceiling. "I said some ugly things." "I remember," I said. "I also remember you carrying chairs in the rain when you were 16 because the rental company wouldn't." He laughed, once. "You were there." "I am always there," I said. It wasn't a threat. It was a fact about work. My aunt sent a card with a photograph of the hall from years ago, our family in the doorway, my mother on the left, laughing at something nobody remembered. On the back she wrote, "Thank you for not humiliating us. Thank you for the payments we did make. Thank you for the roof." I kept cleaning. I still liked the quiet certainties of before and after, the way a room tells you in silence what it needs. I hired more staff with benefits that made sense. The van grew into 2 vans, then 3. I visited the legal clinic on Thursdays and sat in the back while Teresa spoke, taking notes though I knew the material, to remember how knowledge feels when it lands kindly. In spring, I planted 3 boxwood at the entrance and a small herb garden near the kitchen door. The morning light found those plants first, making silhouettes on the wall that looked like soft handwriting. Sometimes I stood there and held a cup of coffee with both hands, letting the heat sit in my fingers like permission. People asked for the story. They always do when a sign changes. I told it without spice. I said we acquired a non-performing loan and offered fair terms. I said we honored those terms, and when they fell through, we took title. I said we repaired the roof. People nodded. Some wanted more drama. I had none to offer. At a Sunday breakfast months later, I sat at the same table where the spoons once made their noise. The laughter was gentler. The portions were smaller. My aunt poured me coffee and her hand didn't shake. My uncle asked how the bookings looked. "Steady," I said. We spoke about the town's farmers market and the school raffle and which electrician shows up on time. As I stood to leave, Garrett touched my sleeve. "You taught me something," he said. "What's that?" "That a quiet plan is louder than a loud promise." Outside, the street was wet and clean. The new sign caught the light, letters simple and sure. I checked the garden, pinched a sprig of rosemary, and rolled it between my fingers. The scent was green and exact. You can start from nothing, and people will laugh. They will laugh because laughter costs less than belief, and it drowns out their own fear. If you are patient, if you learn the landscape, if you keep your hands busy and your papers in order, there comes a day when the thing you built speaks for you. It says only what is true. It asks no one to clap. I locked the door to the office and walked through the ballroom, sun sliding across the polished floor like a blessing you don't need to name. Somewhere in the kitchen, a timer ticked. Somewhere outside, an early guest laughed, and the sound didn't bruise the air. I took a breath that went all the way down, and it felt like standing under a repaired roof during a good rain. If this story touched you, share your thoughts below. And subscribe for more stories of quiet revenge.